special ordered to right after the discussion on HB2, which should clear the gallery. Senator will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Finance, to which was referred, House Bill 2 FNAL, enact revenue for state fees, funds, revenues, and expenditures. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is thought to pass with an amendment by a vote of 42, and Senator Forrester for the committee.
Senator Corsi.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 1 was our math homework. House Bill 2 is a civics lesson. It contains the policy changes necessary to implement the budget decisions we just funded. The Finance Committee did a lot to trim down House Bill 2. We've taken many of the provisions that the House sent us and, where possible, put them on other bills so the important policy questions could be debated outside the budget. House Bill 2 does not contain any of the $129 million in new taxes and fees the governor recommended. In fact, it contains the first cuts to business tax rates in 20 years. It funds Homeland Security by finding a way to replace the revenues from the closure of Vermont Yankee. It increases highway fund dollars on road construction and local aid by lowering interest payments on high-energy bonds. It funds the Senior Center in 16 and requires a plan for the Senior Center Services Center going forward. It implements the community mental health settlement and uses liquor revenues to stand up the alcohol fund. House Bill 2 makes this budget work, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Forster. The bill is now on second reading. The first order of business is the committee amendment. Is there any discussion on the committee amendment? Senator Stiles.
Thank you, Mr. President. It has long frustrated me that we have an adequacy formula that determines how much state aid we should be sending to our local school districts, that we always seem to find a way to ignore some of it. We have a stabilization grant that means some towns get additional money over and above their adequacy allocation, and a cap that keeps state aid from meeting the enrollment needs of other towns as quickly as they need it. This budget increases the cap from 108% to 140% in 2017 and gets rid of it entirely in the following year. While the House budget cut stabilization grant by 10%, the Senate budget lowers that to 4% per year. In total, these changes will result in an additional $4 million to state aid to local schools to meet their increased enrollment. So I ask you to support HB2 to allow communities that have not been getting their adequacy to get now get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Stiles. Senator Susi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise in opposition to the amendment to House Bill 2 and therefore to the bill. As we heard earlier, the numbers are in House Bill 1, where the money comes from, how much is being spent, but House Bill 2 is the words and the policy and the priorities. And in many cases, the devil is in the details. House Bill 2 contains those details. House Bill 2 contains some gimmicks that try to make things work that don't quite work. House Bill 2 contains business tax cuts that were mentioned earlier, but that are being done for a very small group of corporations at the expense of the people and small businesses of this state. House Bill 2 is important for a number of reasons because of what it does, but more importantly because of what it doesn't do. House Bill 2 fails to continue Medicaid coverage for more than 40,000 granted states. House Bill 2 changes the formula for the Alcohol Use Prevention and Treatment Fund, shortchanging that fund out of at least $3 million more that could be used during an opioid crisis. House Bill 2 actually shortchanges coverage for mental health when we know that many people in this state are suffering. And in communities like mine in Manchester, where we have people lining up at the emergency room, those dollars could be critically used. House Bill 2 also does some other things, like using money from the Renewable Energy Fund, a dedicated fund, using money from the Education Credentialing Fund, another dedicated fund, dedicated for purposes other than what they're being used for in this bill. House Bill 2 caps the distribution of meals and rooms. Money's going back to our cities and towns. That money should have been increasing out of the existing formula. This caps it. And House Bill 2 also transfers regulatory authority of risk pools without a public hearing being held on this important policy statement. So House Bill 2 is important. It's important because of what it does, but it's even more important because of what it doesn't do. And because of what it doesn't do, I urge you, my colleagues, to vote down the amendment of Bill 2. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Susie. The question is the adoption of the committee amendment. Any further discussion? You ready for the question?
Roll call.
Second. Roll call is requested by
Everybody.
everybody. Senator Susie, seconded by Senator Sanborn. Okay, you ready for the question? If you're in favor, you're going to say aye. If you're opposed, you're going to say no. The
Parliamentary inquiry?
parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I know there are parts of this House bill that I would not vote for, knowing that it would be for final passage, if I vote for it now, is it for final passage?
No, there's about 10 amendments in the press budget.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
The question is on the adoption of the committee amendment. You ready for the question? Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Woodburn.
No.
Senator Forrester.
Yes.
Senator Bradley.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
No.
Senator Pierce. Senator Cataldo.
Yes.
Senator Hosmer.
No.
Senator Little.
Yes.
Senator Sanborn.
No.
Senator Kelly.
No.
Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator AVARD.
Yes.
Senator Lasky.
No.
Senator Carson.
Yes.
Senator Feltes.
No.
Senator Booton.
Yes.
Senator Reagan.
Yes.
Senator Susan.
No.
Senator Bertzel.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
No.
Senator Fulopart. No. Senator Prescott.
Yes.
Senator Stiles.
Yes.
Senator Morse.
Yes. You've adopted the amendment 13 to 11. The bill is on second reading. Is there any further discussion or amendments? Senator Booton.
Are you recognizing me, Mr. President, for amendment number 2005?
Senator Booton is recognized for floor amendment 2005 and may speak to his amendment as it's being handed out.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members of the Senate, several years ago, this legislature passed a bill to ensure that money above and beyond the operating expense that was raised at Cannon Mountain would go to the park lot. And that's been in place for several years, and it's worked very well. Now here comes a provision in House Bill 2 to divert the park fund money for capital improvement projects for the Cannon Mountain. I think that's the wrong thing to do. We need to keep that money in there for our parks, and they have bonding authority. I think they're about halfway through that bonding authority amount, which is about $3 million. So they have another $3 million, and so I would urge you to please support this amendment and do the right thing for that whole area up there and for our parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Booton. The question is the adoption of floor amendment 2005. Any further discussion? Are you ready for the question? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.
No.
The ayes have it. The floor amendment is adopted. The bill is still on second reading and open for further amendments. Senator Bradley.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I rise to introduce floor amendment 2076.
Senator Bradley offers floor amendment 2076 and may speak to his amendment as it's being handed out.
Thank you very much. This floor amendment would replace sections 270 through 273 of House Bill 2 with what would then become section 270 and 271. There's been a lot of debate about risk pools. There have been study committees in the past on risk pools, but given the need to have competition among risk pools, but also adhere to the order of the New Hampshire Supreme Court and to work with the Bureau of Securities, I would ask that the body adopt this study committee so that we can continue to study while at the same time hopefully working with the Bureau of Securities to ensure that there's a vigorous market for the ability of cities and towns to purchase necessary workers' compensation and liability insurance. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bradley. The question is the adoption of floor amendment 2076. Further discussion. Senator Susie.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise in opposition to House Bill 2, Amendment 276 to House Bill 2. And I do so for a number of reasons. First of all, to give everyone in this room a little bit of context, because this is an issue that has gone on and on and on. This issue came to a head when complaints were filed. Complaints were filed with the Bureau of Securities regulation. Secretary of State was given authority to investigate those complaints. A long investigation ensued. The investigation resulted in an administrative order by a hearings officer. The entity that was the subject of that investigation, the subject of the order, appealed to the New Hampshire Supreme Court. The New Hampshire Supreme Court upheld the administrative order. This has been going on for a number of years. As a matter of fact, risk pools have existed since they were created in statute back in 1987. They were created and they were under the jurisdiction of the Secretary of State Bureau of Securities regulation. I know some have said that they were once an insurance, that they may be considered to be insurance. They're not. They're not. They never have been part of the Department of Insurance. They never have been moved over. Now, have we studied this issue and looked at this issue? Mr. President, we have numerous studies of this issue. If you want the legislative history, I have the file folder with all of that. I'd be happy to share it with all of you. If you want to talk about bills that have dealt with issues involving risk pools, let's start in 2006 with Senate Bill 391, trying to require risk pools to register with the Insurance Department. 2006, yet again, Senate Bill 301 relative to risk pools. That would have moved management over to the Insurance Department, except that our current Senate President and the previous Senate President voted against after careful consideration. Read the transcript. A lot of time and energy spent discussing this issue. Fast forward to 2010, House Bill 1393. That was another bill trying to deal with risk pools. There was an amendment offered then to move risk pools to the Department of Insurance. Are you noticing a trend? That was defeated. 2011, House Bill 655. 2012, Senate Bill 212. There was a study committee that occurred in 2011 as a result of House Bill 283. That's the Stefanik report, chaired by then Representative Stefanik. Most recently in 2013, final report of House Bill 283, right here. All of these studies have been done. What in the world are we studying? Do we need to reconsider and reconsider and reconsider the same issue? Now, do circumstances change and sometimes lend themselves to the need for more study? Of course they do. But in this case, the circumstances haven't changed. What continues to happen is there's a particular entity that came under scrutiny. They didn't like the scrutiny they were under. They didn't like the investigation. You know, there's been a legal proceeding dealing with this outside of this body, the Department of State Bureau of Securities Regulation. That's where this issue belongs. That's where this issue is. That's where this issue continues. Why would we want to inject ourselves in the middle of legal proceedings into this discussion? Let this play out. Let this play out. What is continuing to drive this issue forward? I really can't answer the question. But let me also say that this issue and particular entities that are governed under this have not had an opportunity to be heard. With respect to this one provision of the budget, there was no public hearing. This was simply inserted in. And this is just the wrong time to be dealing with this issue. I would encourage my colleagues to just put this amendment aside. I do have an amendment I would offer that just takes this out of the budget. People want to have debates. Let's have debates on bills, on legislation outside of this. This is not the place for this and not the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Susi. Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to echo the sentiments of my colleague from District 18. You know, sometimes you beat a thing to death. Well, this thing has not only been beaten to death, but in its resurrection, it has been beaten to death. That's crazy. That's crazy. This situation stands by itself. It was never part of insurance, never part of insurance, shouldn't be part of insurance. The item has been litigated over and over again. The court has made its decision. There are still portions of it that remain in litigation. Why are we trying to move it from the Secretary of State's office to the insurance department? Doesn't make any sense at all. The Secretary of State, the division, has done what it's supposed to do, and it's done it well. It's protecting the public. Millions of dollars have been returned to communities. Millions of dollars. We always talk about millions. This is true. Millions of dollars have been returned to the communities because something went awry in terms of how those dollars were used. So why, when this process has proved successful in terms of protecting the public, do we want to send them someplace else where that protection may not be the same, and also interrupt litigation? That's not our job. That's not our job. I don't think there's a person in the room who doesn't respect the Secretary of State and the way he has handled this situation. There's an editorial in one of our local newspapers today that talks specifically about this situation. So we're just creating a statewide furor that doesn't need to be. It just does not need to be. In our committee, I offered an amendment to delete this. It was defeated. I implore my colleagues to defeat this amendment, engage in the amendment that will be presented by the senator from District 18 to delete this from the budget, and let's move forward. We all complain about committees. We don't need another committee. We certainly don't need another committee. We need to do what's in the best interest of the people. Let's delete it and move forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator D'Alessandro. Senator Susi with a question off.
Question, Senator from District 3, please.
Senator Bradley.
Senator, I have one question regarding line 7 of your amendment. Throughout the course of this year, as I've engaged in committee work, and I know many of my colleagues, one of the things we always say is no more than one senator on the study committee. Now, as you said, this is an issue that's been studied and studied and studied again and again. I've got piles of stuff down in my office. I've got some right here. Can you tell me why this one issue merits the time of 3 senators when not one other policy consideration has warranted that?
Thank you for the question, Senator. You know, we all represent about 60,000 people. Most of us have multiple towns in our district. There's a lot of concerns by cities and towns about what's happening. And I think that because of that, it probably rises to an importance level of having 3 senators on this. But in case I didn't make it clear when I introduced the amendment, the provisions of the Finance Committee report that are in House Bill 2, which would have moved the oversight and regulation of these risk pools to the insurance department, is being pulled out. So I thank you for the question, because now I get to talk about it again and remind everybody that all we're doing is ensuring by having a study committee that we look at it, and hopefully after all of the issues that you highlight, I think it's high time that we try to build a bridge and make sure that there's competition and that the New Hampshire Supreme Court rules that sided, or ruling, I'm sorry, that sided on the side of Secretary Gardner are enforced, are in place, and that, as your colleague from Manchester said, these trusts are run appropriately, properly, and safely. And I think that the broader question of why this is still a study committee is to get at some of those issues and to make sure that those kind of bridges get built after all of the contentiousness of this issue. Time to, bring everybody together and solve a problem.
Follow up if I may.
Follow.
Senator, would you believe that although this issue has been studied many times, I don't know that it warrants 3 Senate members more so than any other policy consideration that this body is undertaking?
Well, given how important it is, I guess you're not volunteering.
Actually, I did that once before, believe it or not, Senator, and I wasn't the lucky one chosen. But thank you.
Thank you. Senator Sanborn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of the committee amendment and want to, thank the fine senator from District Number 2 for bringing this issue forward. Although, as most in this body know, I happen to be a real stickler for rules, as my last mentor was a stickler for rules. And my objection has been, we live by rules and have to continue to live by rules. And I again appreciate and thank the senator from District 2 for recognizing and respecting my concerns and agreeing to reconsider where we are in this document today. Mr. President, typically you would find me standing very tightly with my great friend from District 18. We've been talking about this issue for years now, and it's been big, and it's been contentious, and it's been all over the map within this body, within the House, and within the judicial system. And quite frankly, we really have 2 issues that we need to deal with, and to the best of my knowledge, and speaking with those intimately involved, specific placement of regulations has not been something that has been discussed. And predicated on the fine work from the Senator District 2 to raise the issue of where should regulatory placement be, it does call for a commission. And I, like many other people, don't like commissions, but if the Senator from District 18 doesn't want to be on the commission, I guess I would offer 2 since I'm advocating for it, which means you would anyway. But my issue, in addition to a regulatory placement, Mr. President, I'm very concerned for all of our communities. Every one of us, I think, represents the smallest district is 4 towns, the largest one is 58 towns. This affects every single community we have in the state. And this is a very, very time-sensitive problem of ensuring our communities can operate in the best interests of the people of this state affordably with fair market and competition. And Mr. President, you've given me your word, which I take to the bank, because I know it's good for that we'll do everything in your power to try and solve this issue before it's too late. And I'm confident you'll do everything in your power to do so. So this is a very important issue to every single one of us, and I implore all of us to come together and support the committee amendment, be thankful for the senator of District 2, and wait with bated breath for the Senate President to do the great work he always does. Thank you, sir.
Question is the adoption of floor amendment 2076F. Senator
Mr.
Susan.
President, question, Senator from District 9.
Senator Sanborn.
Be happy to.
Senator, would you believe that there is competition. But since this issue began, since the investigation of one particular entity surrounding this issue, that we've had not only one newly created risk pool that's running, but we have a couple others that are already contemplating. So would you believe competition already exists and is going to continue to flourish under the existing set of rules?
Senator, thank you so much for the question. I appreciate it. When I hear the towns that I represent that call me, towns I don't even represent that call me and talk about the fact of the need for more, better, or even just some, in many cases, competition, we understand that the available marketplace for some of these products today has shrunk down to one. We understand that the pricing of it jumping upwards of 40%. I haven't heard a single community reach out to me throughout this process or on this issue that have indicated there is sufficient competition, sufficient products available to them. So while I recognize that lots of deeds have been done and lots of people have been dragged to the trough to do the right thing, now is the time for us to bury this and try and solve a problem very quickly. Because the last thing I want to see this body do is be responsible to terminate a business.
Senator, would you believe this problem is being resolved very quickly, but outside of this very chamber, by regulators and by the judicial system that was put in place to do so?
Senator, thank you for your follow-up question. I do not believe that it is.
Question is the adoption of Floor Amendment 2076. Any further discussion? You ready for the question?
Roll call.
Second.
Roll call by Senator Susie, seconded by Senator AVARD. You ready for the question? If you're in favor, say aye. If you're opposed, say no. Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Whitburn?
No.
Senator Forrester?
Yes.
Senator Bradley?
Yes.
Senator Waters?
No.
Senator Pierce?
No.
Senator Cataldo?
Yes.
Senator Hosmer?
No.
Senator Little?
Yes.
Senator Sanborn?
Yes.
Senator Kelly?
No.
Senator Daniels?
Yes.
Senator Abar?
Yes.
Senator Lasky?
No.
Senator Carson?
Yes.
Senator Feltes?
No.
Senator Booth?
Yes.
Senator Reagan?
Yes.
Senator Susie?
No.
Senator Burtsell?
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro?
No.
Senator Full Clark?
No.
Senator Prescott?
Yes.
Senator Stiles?
Yes.
Senator Moore?
Yes. You've adopted Amendment 2076, 14 to 10. The bill is on second reading and open for further amendments. Senator Susie. Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I offer amendment 2036F and ask to speak to it while it's being handed out.
Senator D'Alessandro offers floor amendment 2036F and speak to his amendment as it's being handed out.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the amendment does two things. It makes an appropriation for salary increases for state employees, and it appropriates funds to the Department of Administrative Services for the biennium ending June 30th, 2017, for the purpose of implementing the state employees' parking benefit agreed to in the collective bargaining agreement. Now, that's the essence of the amendment. Let's talk about the genesis of the piece of legislation and why it's here today. We all know that the administration and the state employees negotiate a contract that we do it on a biannual basis. This contract was negotiated and agreed upon prior to the governor submitting her budget to the House. This agreement called for a modest wage increase. The wage increase is 2.25%. Now, there are those who have said that the state employees have received enormous increases in salary. Let me tell you what they have received. State employees do not receive yearly pay increases, contrary to some of the information which we've seen from some legislators. COLAs are negotiated through collective bargaining and then funded by the legislature. The current contract had 3 raises in it and was in effect from July 2013 and will expire on June 30th, 2015. This was the schedule. In July 2013, 1.5%. In July of 2014, 2.25%. In January of 2015, 2.25%. The 2013-2015 contract also included many changes to the health plan that included co-pays and site of service requirements, which raised the out-of-pocket expenses for the employee and their family while lowering the total cost to the state. In effect, the state employees paid in their raises for the higher health costs. That eats it up. Before the 2013 contract, it had been 5 years since the last raise in January 2009. Step increases. We all talk about step increases, and they should be considered. Step increases are not COLAs, and only 50% receive a step increase in any given year. There are 8 steps, and 31% of the state employees are maxed out at step 8, meaning they'll never receive a step increase. There are 3 years between step 7 and step 8, so about 1/3 of the 19% of state employees receive a step increase. There are 2 years between step 6 and step 7, and 2 years between step 5 and step 6. So only 50% or less will get a step increase in any given year. So why is these items before us? Well, what about a contract? Didn't Daniel Webster settle the contract situation many, many years ago? I mean, it's part of New Hampshire, isn't it? Part of New Hampshire. We live up to our obligations. We live up to our obligations. We have an obligation. We negotiate. We negotiate, and then we say it's either plus or minus. It's either a go or a no-go. And when it's a go, it comes to the legislature, and in the old days, we used to have a legislative committee that used to review these, but we did away with that. We did away with this legislative committee, and now the negotiations fall into the budget process. I think the thing that's key is a contract, and living up to a contract. You negotiate the contract, you should live up to the contract. We've got 8,000 or so state employees. What do they do for us? They plow the roads, they cut the grass, they serve us here in the State House, they serve us in Health and Human Services, in DOT, in safety, in most of the requisites for our life. There's a state employee involved in servicing us. And we're going to turn our backs on these people. We're going to say, no, we aren't going to live up to a contract. Then why do we negotiate? Why do we negotiate? Doesn't make any sense to me. Doesn't make any sense to me. These are hard-working people. You know, I think of little Donna, who cleans our offices on the first floor, pops in here at 4 o'clock in the afternoon because she's got another job, because she doesn't make enough money on this job, doesn't make enough money on the other job. Most of them have about 3 jobs. They don't make any money. I think when we looked at the average retirement of state employees, it was around $12,000. So they haven't made a fortune over the years. But what have they done for us over the years? What have they done for us over the years? We've got great roads. DOT's been wonderful. We have great state police. They've done a great job for us. In the area of Health and Human Services, we get served. They do the job. They come in every day. They come in every day. They do their job. They go home. They deserve to be paid. Right? They deserve it. And they look upon us as the people responsible for taking care of it. So it seems to be living up to a contract, and we've got a history of that. New Hampshire has a history of abiding by contractual relationships. This is a big one. This is an important one. This affects many, many, not only employees, but their families. You know, their families. These are people who do good things for us, do good things for people in the state of New Hampshire. Again, it just seems to me it's an obligation. You know, it's an obligation. It's an obligation that we should respond to. You know, I was walking into the steakhouse this morning, and I bumped into two nuns, two sisters of mercy. And they were coming here to stand guard on the budget process. And one of them said, I know you. My cousin, Tommy Harding, was a great athlete here in Concord. Speaks highly of me. I coached against him when he was at St. John's High School, and I was up at Kennett High School in Concord. And they said, boy, I hope you'll do the right thing. That was a wonderful experience for me this morning. To think that these two ladies, and they're well into their 70s, I mean, well into mine, but well into their 70s, were walking down Main Street to come here to support people who deserved something, who merited something. Well, that's a great thing. And I think we have to stand up for our employees. It's an imperative that we do that. If we don't, you talk about the public trust. I mean, we are the people who carry the public trust. They trust us. They believe in us. They believe that we're going to do the right thing for them. So I ask, Mr. President, I ask my colleagues, pass this amendment, let's go forward, let's do the right thing. Let's do the right thing. They're not asking for a fortune. There's a quid pro quo here. They're giving up some of their health insurance. They're saving money for the state. They're doing the work that needs to be done for the state. Let's do our job and let's support them. I think we have a responsibility to do that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Alexander. Senator Forster.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask my colleagues to vote down this amendment. No, I agree with Senator from District 20. Our state employees are hardworking and they do provide excellent service to the people of the state of New Hampshire. This past Saturday, I was up at Glencoe, had a call from the state employees asking me to come up and talk to them about the pay raise. So I spent probably an hour and a half up there, and you know, what I said to them was, I know that if anyone's ever been up to Glencoe, you know those folks work hard to take care of our most vulnerable citizens. We heard nothing, or very little, I should say, I don't want to say nothing, about the pay raise. We all know that in the House budget, they took this $12 million COLA out, which is, by the way, $30 million in total funds. And it wasn't in the House budget as it came over the Senate. Someone had to bring an amendment to the pay raise, and no one did. We considered dozens of amendments in the Finance Committee. We considered bills that had been put on the table. I spoke to senators of both parties on priorities they wanted to see in this budget. No one offered an amendment for this pay raise in Senate Finance. In fact, Senate 1 and 2 didn't come until the very end because we wanted to make sure where we were in terms of what we had for funding. Up until that point, and I guess it was change the premium contribution for retirees from 12.5% to 20%. Ernie came in and he talked to me. In fact, and he explained to me how bad this would be for our retirees. Then I got a letter from Commissioner Hampshire who laid it all out for me. So in the committee, we talked about this and how we needed to restore that back to the 12.5%, and that's what we did. Now here's another example. Just recently, in the last couple of days, we started hearing about the district offices being closed. We haven't heard anything about that. In fact, we had a meeting with the Commissioner of Health and Human Services, and on his list of priorities, that wasn't there, so we never really discussed it. My point being is that we listened, we heard what was important. The amendment was brought in, we entertained it. There was never an amendment. I talked just this afternoon in the hallway to some folks who represented the union and told them that I was disappointed that this was not something that was brought in to the Senate Finance Committee. And I expect that we will have a conversation about this in committee of conference, because at this point, so that we got to figure out a way, if this is going to move forward, how we're going to fund this. So I would ask my colleagues to vote down this amendment. Thank you.
Question is the adoption of floor amendment 2036. Senator Birdsall to speak. Question.
For Senator Forrester.
Senator Forrester.
Thank you for taking my question, Senator. Do you know, can you tell me when the first time, or when the SEA brought up the fact that they, about the increases?
Well, actually, thank you for the question. I actually had a meeting on March 20th with folks from the SEA. And after that, I think at one point, Senator from District 20, I don't recall it, but I understand that he brought it up in Finance Committee, and it was something we were going to discuss in the future. And again, it never came up until, actually, I think it was the 27th, the last day that we were going to vote. And actually, the senator from District 1 brought it up and said, what about pay raises? At that point, my mind was turned.
Follow.
Thank you for taking my question. So, any information looking for the increases were done way after, in fact, right before you signed the
Yes, yes, that's true.
Question is on adoption of floor amendment 2036. Senator Clark with a question of
Senator Forrester.
Senator Forrester.
Senator Forrester, I have here a press release that is dated Friday, February 6th, where you refer to the fact that Governor Maggie Hassan had proposed raises, pay increases for our state employees. That's more than a month for what you just spoke to a moment ago. My question is, you were aware of this according to this article early on, and isn't it your responsibility as chair of the Finance Committee to at least bring this to the attention of your colleagues as you're developing the budget, and not just to rely on someone else bringing it up? It seems to me that this is, the height of the responsibility when we know that this is an important issue that has been negotiated and it is pending before us. Will you be able to comment on the fact that this article, this press release, speaks about those raises as early as February 6th?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I haven't seen the press release. Certainly it is something that I think we were all aware of. We appreciate the fact that the SBA worked on this contract earlier in the process, because as you remember, in the last budget, pay raise was brought in at the 11th hour, and we adjusted for that. And so this time they were ahead of schedule, and that was great. But in terms of my responsibility, I believe, as the chair of Senate Finance Committee, is to keep the process moving along, to make sure everybody has every opportunity to bring in amendments, to have discussions, and I certainly provided that. And so if it was a topic that was of interest and importance to anyone, they should have brought it forward.
Follow-up?
Paul?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Forrester. My question then is, did you bring other amendments before the Finance Committee for issues that were important to you? Or did you wait to have other people on the committee bring those forward?
Thank you for the question. Any senator has the ability to bring forward any amendment that is important to them. And so if there was an issue that was important to me, that was top of mind for me, I would certainly bring that forward. As apparently, this issue is important to Senator D'Alessandro, he could have brought that amendment forward.
Paul?
Thank you, Mr. President. Am I then to conclude from your comments today that this was not an issue that was important to you with regard to our state employees?
Certainly, it was an issue that was important, Senator. Thank you for the question. But if you've ever been the chair of Senate Finance, there are many issues that are important. And this was not something that was brought to my attention. Again, I rely on others who have issues that are important to them to bring those topics forward, bring those amendments forward.
Thank you.
Senator D'Alessandro?
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, let me just say that I brought it forward. I brought it forward twice. Okay. Senate Finance is run a little differently than it's been run in the past. I chaired Senate Finance, the two sides. So I think I don't have all the answers, but I got a few of them. When I brought it up, it was a no-go. Don't talk about it. Now, when we went through the process, we never addressed the book. That was you know, the book that's prepared by LBA, the statement, the comparative statement. We never did the reviews of the items. When I brought it up at the end because I thought that was the right time to bring it up. You had the money. It was a money item. I said we ought to discuss this at that time. Listen, we never look at the compare report. We never look at it. We never look at the detailed change sheets. We never look at those. So if you're talking about bringing it up early on, it wasn't there. It was never in the House budget. So the idea was to bring it up at the end when we had finished all of our discussions. So I find that the fact that we didn't do it that's not a fair statement. That's not a fair statement. I brought it up twice. And if we had gone through the detailed change sheets, then that would have been the time to discuss it, because when the House action took place, it wasn't there. All right? When we discussed things, we looked at the sheets that you brought to us on a daily basis. We didn't have any input. I didn't have any input into those sheets. We were reacting to those sheets all the time. My reaction was, I would like to discuss the employees' pay rates. I did that twice. And that's my job as a member of the committee. I want to make that clear. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator D'Alessandro. Senator Whittle to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would just like to say that the process that we ran through the Finance Committee, I believe, was entirely open, entirely inclusive. There was a lot of communication going on. We all had the very large change reports in front of us. We all could sit down on a regular basis. We all did sit down, and we flipped through them as the agencies came before us, and we looked at all of the changes that were proposed between the governor's proposed budget and the House budget. More importantly, much more clear that a document this big with, I believe, close to 1,600 pages in it, printed on both sides in fine type, are these sheets. These are the reports that we all got every morning when we came into Senate Finance Committee. And it told us, these are the items that we will be dealing with today. And I don't recall the day, I'm sorry, Senator Forrest, that you told us that you sent out your memo to every member of the Senate saying if there's anything at all that you want addressed in the budget, please come talk to me about it, and we'll discuss an amendment. And every morning we would sit down, and on these item sheets, we would see what are the things that we have on hold that have been raised and we had talked about already, but we decided that we're not going to vote on them yet because they need more discussion. We've got on here the new amendments. And I've got them here chronologically going from the 26th all the way back through to the 21st. And we ended each day by looking at these sheets saying, okay, here's what we accomplished today, and asking, is there anything else that should be on these sheets? This is simple, clear, communicative. You don't need a 6-inch thick document with thousands and thousands of lines to show you where the differences are. You can say, see, this is what we are going to be talking about tomorrow. And always end with the question, does anybody have anything else that they'd like to see on this report? I don't know how it could have been any more simple, any clearer, any more direct, communicated any better, and yet, no one ever said, I would like to see the state employees pay raise on that list. No one. We had reporters in the gallery, out in the hearing. We had dozens of people that came to watch our deliberations every single day. And many of them came up to us afterwards and said, you haven't talked about this yet, can I talk to you about an amendment? And this is how many of our names show up on these amendments. They come, they say, I've got an idea, I have a question, I have a concern, can we talk about this? We would talk about it with them, and we would say, that's not a bad idea. One of us would put our name on the amendment, we'll bring it forward. That's how the process worked. It was extremely open. It was extremely communicative. It was extremely welcoming, extremely flexible. I don't know where the ball got dropped, how the ball got dropped, but it hit the ground, and nobody picked it up. And that's how we got to this point. So I think, as Senator Forrester said, we all know that we still have a committee of conference process ahead of us. I think we ought to vote down this amendment, and we ought to move forward into the committee of conference and pick this up. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Waters, a question on Senator from District 2, please. Senator Forrester. Thank you for taking my question, Mr. President. And actually now both you and the senators from 8, I mentioned the committee of conference. So it's my understanding then that you believe that you can bring up and bring forward potentially this contract, even though it will not have been a position of the House or Senate. Thank you. Further discussion? Senator Powell?
Thank you, Mr. President. Questions for the Dean of the Senate, District 20. Take a question.
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro?
Senator D'Alessandro, thank you for taking my question. You just heard Senator Waters' question to the Chair of the Board of Finance. Is it your understanding that if this employee pay raise is not included in the HB2 version of the House or HB2 version of the Senate, that it will not be able to be discussed in the committee of conference?
Well, thank you for the question. You know, in the past, the past is history, but ancient history. And if you haven't discussed it in either body, it can't be brought up to the committee of conference. I mean, that's how committees of conferences have been conducted since I've been around here. And I saw my first committee of conference in 1973. So, if it doesn't appear in either document, it's not going to be considered.
Follow-up. Thank you, Mr. President.
yeah, I think it's time to pick up the bounce. And we ought to go forward with it. And, you know, if the ball was dropped, let me tell you something, it wasn't dropped because they didn't bring it up. It was dropped because it wasn't considered. And that, to me, that's the issue.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Bradley.